Welcome to Menopause Morph, your time to change. We're here to help you thrive through your menopause, bringing you experts in many fields to help you from perimenopause to menopause and beyond to become the strong, vibrant woman nature intended you to be. Hosted by Pauline McCarthy of the Pearls of Pauline, pearls of wisdom, compassion, and joy.
Hello, welcome to this week's Menopause Morph, your time to change. Today, I would like to talk about the beginning of perimenopause for most of us. I think when we started getting symptoms, many of us said, nobody told me it would be like this. In fact, nobody told you anything about menopause. It's been such a taboo subject in the cupboard, not spoken about. I remember my mother, she never mentioned a word about menopause. Mind you, she never mentioned a word about all the pregnancies she had as well. But I think, from what I hear, a lot of women, menopause was never spoken in their home. It was never spoken at work, never spoken in their universities. Even most medical doctors, when they're studying, they're lucky if they get one day about menopause. Which is really sad considering that every single woman in the world, if they live long enough, will go through menopause. So surely it should be quite high up there in topics. I think that if men went through menopause, there would be billions thrown at the cure or how to overcome the symptoms. But since it's a woman's problem, sadly, we do tend to be rather neglected in that field. But why is it taboo? No, it's not taboo in all societies, but in Western society, it is kind of taboo. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we tend to think of menopause as being like something for old women. And when women start to get their perimenopausal symptoms, which is typically in their mid-40s, but it can be in their mid-30s and younger. Thankfully for most people it's in their mid-40s, but it varies, as I said. So when it comes to the fact that the doctor says, oh, you're having menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, it's like the alarm bells go off in your head going, what? No, I'm not an old woman. I'm still in my prime, which we are. But so it takes a little while to come to terms with it. Especially nowadays, many women are leaving off having children until their 30s even. So if you hear that you're having perimenopausal symptoms, it must put you into a little bit of a panic. So it's very important to be aware that perimenopause, typically it can last about 4 years, but it can last up to 10 years. And for some women, just a few months. For every single woman, it's a different story. But if you feel that you are having menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, it's best to go to your doctor and discuss it and see if you really are. So what kind of symptoms do you want to look out for? These would be like your hot flushes or hot flashes, depending on which side of the pond you're on. Breast tenderness. Now, a lot of women, when they get this breast tenderness, they think, oh my goodness, I must be pregnant because they experienced that when they were pregnant. So just a simple pregnancy test would let you know that you're not pregnant, and then you have to think, well, why else would my breast be tender? Another one is irregular periods. Irregular periods can be caused by many things, stress, whatnot. Eating badly. Some people are malnourished, especially if they're on a diet and they're really malnourished and their periods stop altogether. But also irregular periods can be caused by fibroids and many other things. So that again would be something you would want to go to your general practitioner or your gynecologist about. A lot of people presume that you would get a gap. The gap between your periods would just get longer and longer and longer until the periods disappear. But for a lot of women, myself included, my periods came closer together. Well, let's sort of backtrack a little bit. I always say to people that I had 2 menopauses because when I was 40, I started getting more. Yeah, I started getting irregular periods, and it was like it would be 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 4 weeks, 3 weeks. It was all over the place. And I went to see my GP and he said, oh, this is early menopausal symptoms. But I didn't believe him. So I went to a gynecologist and he looked inside and he could see that the wall of my vagina was thinning. And he said, yeah, this is typical perimenopausal symptoms. And he put me on birth control pills. At least that's what I think it was, because at the time I was going through a very difficult divorce and I really was like in a mess. There's a lot of that time period that I don't remember. But what he did give me was equivalent of Prozac. It was called something else here in Iceland. And he said, this will help you even better than the hormones. And perhaps he was referring to the fact that I was going through a very difficult divorce, or perhaps it's just that a lot of women, when they're having mood swings, the doctors automatically prescribe them antidepressants. So I think there is a lot of things we can do naturally without resorting to that. But at the time, it did help me, because I was going through a very difficult divorce. And actually, sometime later, I met a wonderful man who I'm now married to, and my life became a lot calmer. And I ran out of these hormonal pills, and I was so busy with all the things. I've got this ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Yeah. So sometimes I'm like all over the place. And, I always kept forgetting to go to the pharmacy. But here I noticed that my periods started becoming regular. And for some years they were just regular, actually 28 days, like on the dot, until maybe about 8 years later, then they started becoming more frequent. In fact, it was like almost every 2 weeks. And I went to the gynecologist, and he recommended a hysterectomy. I was put on the waiting list to go in for a hysterectomy. I think I was on that waiting list for about 2 years. And then when they finally phoned me, my husband was sick at the time. Now, they had said to me that when you had the hysterectomy, it would take about 1 month to recover, and that you couldn't lift anything heavy, and you had to make sure you had somebody at home to look after you. I remember when my sister had a hysterectomy many, many, many years ago when she was quite young, I went to look after her. So I knew that this would be quite important to have somebody at home to look after me. So when they phoned, I said, is it possible for me to delay it for a while, because my husband is quite ill just now and maybe it'll take him a few months to get better. So they said, that's not a problem at all. We'll just call the next person on the list and we'll put you further down the list. So happened maybe about 6 months later, they called me again. Now, by this time, actually, my periods had stopped, and I hadn't had a period or any kind of bleeding for at least 3 months. So I said to them, I don't think I need this hysterectomy. So thank you very much. I'll call you back if I do. Or my doctor will call you back. So that was it. And I never actually had the hysterectomy. So that's something to think about. But of course, there are definitely situations where a hysterectomy can be called for. But that's my story now. So let's go back to the menopausal symptoms. So we were talking about irregular periods, then vaginal dryness. Now, this is very distressing for many women, because just one day it's painful and it's like, whoa, I've been having sex like most of my life and it's not been painful, and why is it suddenly painful? It's very important to get this checked out, and there are many natural ways to overcome this. If you listen to some of the previous podcasts, you'll be able to find that out. But I'm hoping to have an episode about different kind of lubricants and which is the best, and let's have some fun over lubrication. Why not? It's always good to have a laugh when it comes to menopause and all the crazy things that go with it. So what else do we have? Mood swings. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I was mentioning before about the antidepressants that my doctor put me on. For me, I didn't really have mood swings, but I was going through a period of depression, even though I didn't notice it myself at the time. But some women, it's like they don't recognise themselves. And many times I get the partners of menopausal women contact me and saying, when will I get my wife back? Will I ever get my wife back? Because this monster that's in my bed is not my wife, and this is not the beautiful, delightful woman that I married. This is some crazy bitch. And I have to say to them that I know it's very distressing for you, but how much more distressing do you think it is for her? Because she's behaving like this and she's not understanding why she's behaving like this. For myself, I've been very lucky. I'm quite stable, let's say. But I do have my moments, as we all do. And what I try to do is take a deep breath and have this internal dialogue inside me going, okay, is this person behaving absolutely, completely stupid, or is it just me? Would this be something that normally I would cope with? And today I'm finding that I want to punch their head in. And if we have this conversation with ourselves, we can come to understand that many times it's something that really isn't all that of a problem, but we're just wound up so tight that we feel like we're going to explode or punch their head in. But it's very important to breathe and think before we just let rip. And then again, if you think it's too much and you can't handle it, then please go to your doctor and ask him for something. Or you can find some of the natural ways to overcome this. I find that meditating and just thinking, I go for a walk down the beach when things get too stressful. Take my dog out for a walk. Sometimes in Iceland when there's a storm, that's not very possible. But anyway, there are things that we can do instead of just letting rip. Because when we just go berserk, it will put a strain on our relationships. And of course, it's not just our partners, but we can be grumpy as hell with our co-workers, with our kids. What I find is really important is a couple of times I have been bitten the head off my boys when they have just walked into the kitchen to ask something like, is dinner ready? And I have just had too much, and then I've just went, what do you think? Why are you asking dinner? Why don't you make it yourself? And, like going crazy. And the poor boys are just run out or run down the stairs, and then I feel so bad that I have shouted at them like this. Thankfully, it hasn't happened that many times, maybe 3 times in the last few years. But every time it has happened, I've realised that I have been at fault. They had done nothing wrong. So what I did was I would go to their bedroom and knock tenderly on the door. Say, can I come in, please? And there you can hear them like hesitant, like, oh no, she's going to come in and bite my head off. But I come in and say, I'm sorry, and sit down with them and say, look, I'm not perfect, and sometimes I'm just at my wit's end, and you just happen to walk into the room at the wrong moment, and I'm here to apologise, and I'm asking you to forgive me. And they cry because they're just so relieved that I'm not going to bite their head off. But also, I have spoken with many people about this, and they're surprised that a parent apologises to their child, because apparently that doesn't happen all that often, which I think is very sad because, okay, this Elton John song, sorry seems to be the hardest word. And for many people it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And I think we are a better person for being able to say, I'm sorry, and for being able to say, I'll try not to do it again, and really mean that. A lot of people say, I'll try not to do it again, or I'll never do that again. And then the next day they do it again. So then the child or the partner or the workmate don't trust you ever again. So it's really important to have that internal dialogue with yourself. And then when you realise that you have been out of step, to go and apologise. And then to really, really take it to heart that next time I'm not just going to let off the handle, I'm just going to think about it, talk about it. There's a lot we can do. All we have to do is think. Is take a few seconds, breathe deeply, count to 10 as they say, and that can really improve relationships. What other symptoms do we have? Trouble sleeping. Oh my, this is a big one. I know people say, well, how can I improve my sleeping when I'm going to the toilet a few times, I'm waking up with night sweats? Well, a lot of it has to do with getting yourself into that space in your head where you're ready to go to sleep. Like, of course, simple things like don't use your computer or watch TV before going to bed. You can read a book if you need to do something. Get into a routine. Make sure that the bedroom is not too hot or not too cold. I always try to keep a window open, and which is usually possible except when we have storms here. And then it can be difficult for me because then the storm is making a noise and the room is stuffy. But thankfully we don't have storms every single night. But it's really important to get as much sleep as your body needs. So if you feel that you're going to be up a few times for the toilet or waking up with night sweats, make sure you have fresh sheets and fresh pillow beside your bed so that you can change it just quickly and then get back to sleep quick again. Don't try to get back to sleep in a wet bed because it just won't work. What I used to do in the beginning was I would flip my pillow over and that would work. But then when I would wake up again and that side would be soaked as well. And when you flipped it back, the other side was wet. So have an extra pillow beside your bed. And if you're having a lot of night sweats, have 2 or 3 pillows beside your bed ready and have spare sheets and spare a duvet or whatever you need because it's a nightmare trying to sleep with wet bedding. What else? Yes, there's a very interesting drink that you can make. It's called golden milk. It's made with turmeric, and the turmeric, you boil it in with a little bit of black pepper to activate it, and then you make that paste into a little jar. Then you take 1 spoonful of that and put it into a cup of, well, I use coconut milk, but other people use almond milk or soya milk, something like that. And then 1 big tablespoon of coconut oil. You can Google and you'll find lots of recipes for it. So if you drink that before you go to bed, it really calms you down. It has a lot of health benefits. But it's really, really important to find the best ways to give yourself a good night's sleep. Because a lot of that grouchiness comes because we're tired. Many difficulties come because we're tired. We don't want to have sex because we're tired. We don't want to get up in the morning because we're tired. Sometimes you just want to give up on life because it's like you just go through, you feel like a zombie because you haven't had a decent night's sleep. Now, if you don't have a decent night's sleep for weeks, for months, then it damages your health so much. So for me, this is really, really important. And I think for most women, it's really, really important to get a good night's sleep, at least 8 hours. And if you're not getting enough sleep, then try and get an afternoon nap. But you have to put yourself first. And if you find that you're doing all the chores and the kids or your husband are just watching TV, then it's time to sit down and say to them, okay, now it's time for me. I'm not doing your laundry anymore. You have to do it yourself. I'm not going to do this because now I'm going through perimenopause and my body needs a break. And if you want me to be like a bear with a sore head, then don't help, because then I will be like a bear with a sore head. I need my sleep and I need everybody in the family to help. What else do we have here on this list? Weight gain. Oh my goodness. So I'm sure many of us have had this perimenopausal weight gain. Also for the ones of us that are stress eaters, when you're going through a lot of stress, then you will tend to eat. And if you're going through perimenopause at the same time, you will put on so much that you'll be like the Michelin man with all the spare tires. One of the experts I was on a few weeks ago, Dr. Glenn Livingston, he's coaching me just now on how to get rid of my spare tire or tires. And I'll be putting that online soon so you can follow along. It's like one of my list of things to do, to put online. My goodness, got ADHD, you tend to have a lot of things on your to-do list. So look out for that. Okay, so these are the kind of symptoms that you want to be looking out for. But most of them can also be attributed to some other kind of medical issues. So if you're in your 30s or early 40s and you aren't convinced that it's perimenopause, even if you are convinced, it's always better to go and get checked up. What you can do is you can ask your doctor to take a blood test to test for hormones. Now, if you just do a one-off, this really won't give you a good picture because hormones can vary from day to day, from hour to hour almost. So it's good to maybe take 2 or 3 blood tests over a time period, over, say, 2 weeks, to get a better idea of how your hormones are in your body. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, when I went to see my gynecologist, he noticed that there was thinning of the vagina. So an experienced gynecologist will be able to see very quickly you're going through perimenopause just by the thinning of your vaginal wall. So what are the kind of things that we can do to improve our symptoms without going through hormone replacement therapy? If that's your decision to go through hormone replacement therapy, that's your decision. Personally, I would rather, I was mentioning, I had 2 menopauses. One was when I was 40 and I went through a few years getting this hormone replacement therapy and the Prozac. Then I met my new husband and then my periods came back. So a few years later, maybe 8 years later or something like that, then I started having the periods coming too much together. That was when they put me on the list for the hysterectomy. So then eventually the period stopped. Actually, what happened was I had no periods for 10 months and then a period came. So then I had to go back on the clock and wait for the 12-month period, because officially menopause is when you've had no periods for 12 months. So you can be lucky and be like me and have it thrown out. But occasionally, very, very occasionally, somebody maybe hasn't had a period for 2 years and then they'll get some spotting. So if that happens, don't panic. Go and see your gynecologist just to get checked up. But it can happen occasionally. Not very often, but it can happen. But of course, if you ever get any spotting when it's not expected, then it's always good to go and get a checkup. What else do we have? Natural ways to help. So in my second menopause, let's say, then I tried to do everything naturally. And one of the most important things is to get a little bit of exercise. It doesn't mean going to the gym for 2 hours a day. It can just be walking your dog for 20 minutes or just walking yourself for 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be every day, but we shouldn't be sitting about all the time. They say that sitting is the new smoking. So remember that. And even if you know what a great thing is to set your timer on your mobile phone. Everybody seems to have a mobile phone these days. So set your timer for 45 minutes. Then every 45 minutes, get up and stretch. Stretch, go and have yourself a cup of tea or do what you have to do, and then get back to work. You'll also find that your brain has sort of readjusted and you think better. But it's really bad for the system just to be sitting for hours and hours and hours, always in the same position. It's really bad for all your internal organs. Stop smoking. If you smoke, stop smoking. I'll say that again. Stop smoking. Again, stop smoking. I just don't understand it. But of course it's addictive. But the smoking will make all your menopausal symptoms worse. So let's all say it together. 1, 2, 3. Stop smoking. If you can't stop, at least reduce. So what's next? Yes, more sleep. Obviously, we spoke about that. That's really important. And even if you have to sleep a few hours on the weekend, in the afternoon, do it, because you will really feel an improvement. Less alcohol. Okay, ladies, I know a lot of you like, but why don't you cut down? In fact, you could try and see how it affects you. Say you just have it on a Friday night or a Saturday night. See how your symptoms are the next day. Actually, I'm working on a menopause journal, which should be out soon, where one side of the page you put down everything you've eaten, all your medication, any kind of exercise you've done that day. And then on the other side, you record how your symptoms have been that day. So that would be a great way to see, is alcohol affecting you, or is there something that you're eating or not eating that is affecting you? Is the lack of exercise affecting you, or is too much exercise affecting you? Then after you've been doing that for a few weeks, then you can begin to see a pattern. So healthy weight, it's really important to get to a healthy weight. A lot of people are fanatical about their weight. That is just going to give you stress. I was talking to a friend a few days ago saying that, I'm doing this weight loss program with Dr. Glenn, and she's saying, you're not fat, you don't have to panic about it. And I said, look, I don't have a self-esteem issue. I have a health issue, and the excess weight is affecting my health, and 2017 is the year that I get my health back. So this is why I'm doing this. And I would recommend not starving yourself to death, but eating in a way that helps you reduce weight and helps you become more healthy. Because extra kilos or extra pounds, whatever side of the pond you're on, whatever weight scales you use, any extra ones, it's not doing you any good at all. You can look sexy and big, but think about the health consequences. And then more calcium. Now, of course, menopausal women do have an increased risk of osteoporosis, so we want to increase our calcium intake. A lot of women just think, drink milk, but that's not necessarily the case. And of course, nowadays, more people are getting into not drinking milk or taking milk products. Be that as it may, I'm not one of them. There are other ways, better ways to get calcium. For example, sesame seeds have a lot of calcium in them. And if you look back to some of our previous podcasts, you'll be able to find out more things about what you should be eating. I'm not going to bore you with all the list of vegetables and whatnots. You can search them out in our previous podcasts. And in the future, I'm sure I will have more wonderful experts on to give us more advice about our eating habits. So for today, it's already much longer than what I wanted to talk. So I just want to thank you for tuning in today. And I look forward to meeting up with you next week on Menopause Morph. And look, if you have a minute, please review the podcast and write a review, even if it's just like, I listened to the Menopause Morph podcast today. Because we really need some reviews to get up there, especially in iTunes, because the review rating is really important. The more review ratings you have, the more it's advertised by iTunes, and therefore more women will be able to find it and listen and be helped. And that's what we're all about. We're all about helping each other. In the future, I'll also be making a forum where we can all chat together and ask questions. And if we're up at 4 a.m. with night sweats and can't get back to sleep, at least maybe we can go online and find a fellow menopausal woman that we can chat to and pour our heart out to and know that we are not alone. Because ladies, you're not alone. Every single woman will eventually go through menopause, but it just so happens that there's quite a few million of us right now going through it. Okay, so until next week, take care. I love you all. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Menopause Morph, Your Time to Change. If you've enjoyed the program, be sure to subscribe to the next one and please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help us spread the message about thriving through the menopause. To get a free ebook, more menopausal resources, and to connect with Pauline, please visit www.menopausemorph.com.